things are starting to come into focus here in terms of these lineup decisions. To me, Huss, I look at the 15 forwards that are left in camp. To me, 10 of them are absolute locks. They're not going anywhere. Scheifele, Connor Ehlers, Dubois, Wheeler, Perfetti, Lowry, Appleton, Gagne, and Barron. To me, those 10 are on the team. That means that there's 5 guys battling for 3 remaining spots because I expect the Jets will have 13 forwards. You've got Lambert, Manalainen, Harkins, Toninato, and Gustafsson. Now, Gustafsson would actually need waivers to be sent down to the Moose, so I think you can pretty much say that he's on the team, whether it says in the top 12 or as the 13th guy. They're not going to risk losing David Gustafsson. So now really you're down to 4 guys for 2 spots. And it's interesting to me, Lambert and Manalainen, who have both had really good camps, they don't need waivers. Toninato and Harkins, they would need waivers. And I guess when it comes down to these decisions, one thing that Rick Bowness and no doubt Kevin Cheveldayoff are going to have to weigh here is, are they willing to risk, if they feel that Lambert and or Manalainen have earned a spot over Toninato and or Harkins, are you risking losing one or both of Toninato and Harkins to make room for those guys? And that's a decision that's going to have to come now in the next few days. And it's going to be, fascinating to see how it all shakes out. Similar decisions on the blue line where, there's 10D in camp. Morrissey, Pionk, Schmidt, Dylan, DeMello, those guys are all on the team, of course. To me, it's down to Stanley, Heinola, Samberg, Kovacevic, Capobianco. That's 5 guys for 3 spots because I suspect they'll keep 8D. And again, Stanley, he'd need waivers. I don't think the Jets are risking losing him for nothing. Kovacevic and Capobianco, they would both need waivers. And I'd be really leery about putting Johnny Kovacevic on waivers. So I wonder if on the blue line, Capobianco, okay, you probably are okay with risking it. He probably clears. And then is it down to one of Heinola or Samberg that's going to be in your 8? And the other guy who doesn't need waivers goes to the Moose. I mean, these are all things that are going to have to be factored in. And it's why, Huss, to sum it all up, I still wouldn't rule out a trade in the coming days as this lineup becomes clear and other teams around the league they're getting into a same spot. Some teams are seeing where they maybe have strengths and weaknesses. If you're the Jets and Kevin Cheveldayoff, are you working the phones potentially to find a spot for a guy that maybe doesn't have a spot on your roster, but you want to get him out of the picture so that he's not blocking someone else's path?
Yeah, I mean, that's a conversation we've had for a long time. And, with the lack of real significant action through July and August, we have been talking about this for weeks that, once the dust sort of settles on the lineup through training camp, there certainly could be the opportunity for potentially another move. I'm with you on Stanley. I think he would get picked up for sure on waivers. There will be another general manager that says, okay, we'll give this guy a shot.
Right.
Johnny Kovacevic, I'm with the theory of that. I mean, I think he would be attractive, especially at his rate, at his age, for a team that, was probably not very deep on the blue line. As far as the forwards go, and this is why I would be nervous if I am Jansen Harkins right now. Every team at this point is in a tough spot. Who do we have to keep? I mean,
right.
You really have to stand out, I think, to be a guy that gets plucked off the waiver wire when there's 150 guys going on waivers basically at the same time.
Yes.
And I would almost put Toninato in that equation as well. And listen, do they plan on having those guys on the Manitoba Moose? No, probably not. I mean, certainly with the contracts that they have right now. However, Mike, that's part of the thing that Rick Bowness said right off the bat, that, people are going to earn their way onto the team or get themselves cut. And
right.
If you believe that as it was stated to the media and presumably the players as well, I think it really does bring a ton of intrigue going into these final couple games, especially considering Harkins isn't even in the lineup, and we know Toninato is essentially taking the spot of Pierre-Luc Dubois, who's not able to go.
Right, and you probably don't want to be the quote placeholder at this point in time because it's it's not necessarily a good omen for what might be to come. And look, let's not forget about the waiver rules for those who maybe aren't familiar with it. Other teams can't just collect, other teams' players like baseball cards and just hold on to them. Like if someone wanted to claim Jansen Harkins, for example, off waivers, you have to include Jansen Harkins on your 23-man roster. I believe it's a 30-day window that you'd have to keep him at the NHL level. And then if the team wanted to send him back down, to the minors, to their farm system, the team that he got claimed from would have the first right to get him back. So, yeah, I mean, you're right. There's going to be a wave of players hit waivers here in the next couple days. To me, the guys that you'd really, again, Logan Stanley, David Gustafsson, which is why I don't think the Gus bus, I think he's probably your fourth line center to start the season. But even if he's the 13th forward, I don't think he's the 14th or 15th forward is what I'm saying, because there's no way they'd risk losing David Gustafsson on waivers, because another team would absolutely pick him up. Kovacevic is interesting for sure. It just, we know there's some teams out there. The Toronto Maple Leafs certainly are hurting on the blue line. They would have seen a guy like Johnny Kovacevic play against the Marlies a lot over the last couple seasons. But again, they couldn't just grab the player and then park him in their farm system. They'd have to keep him on the roster. So it'll be interesting. And these are all the decisions that I suspect are now going to have to get hashed out. And it's why tomorrow's game, to me, is so vital for all these guys. I think we're going to see all of these guys, save for Jansen Harkins, that we've identified as kind of fighting for jobs. They're all going to play tomorrow, I suspect. And how that shakes out, the Jets are off on Thursday, Huss. We may see pretty much the final cuts. I don't know that the Jets are going to get down exactly to 23 by Friday when they head to Calgary and then stay in Alberta for a few days in Banff. But I don't think they're taking everybody that's currently in camp. I think maybe they bring 2 extra players at most, and then kind of figure it out as camp concludes. But, I think for a lot of guys, tomorrow is the last chance.
No, there's no doubt about it. Now, taking it back to the blue line for a minute, I wouldn't be surprised at this point if, and this, I wouldn't have said this before, I probably wouldn't have even said this in the offseason, that Logan Stanley might be a guy that could be on the move. And right. I think it really does come down to their level of confidence that Dylan Samberg is a guy that's ahead of him on the depth chart. And then Ville Heinola is a unique player, and whether Ville is with the Moose or whether he's with the club right now, has a unique package that I think at some point, whether it's right now or later on this season, needs to have an extended run in the lineup so the Jets truly know what they have in this player at the NHL level. But when you think about Stanley's camp, his performance in the preseason games and the competition that he's getting and the value that I think he still would have around the league, I wouldn't be surprised at some point they sort of it's basically reading the room. And if the 5 veterans are sticking around and you've got these other 2 young guys that you want to be in the mix, maybe that's a player that would actually have some value elsewhere in the league that might be the player that could be moved. And then the question is, if they are moving one of those players, are they trying to bring back another forward, or are they trying to replace a draft pick or 2 that they used up to acquire the likes of Brendan Dillon and Nate Schmidt last season?
For sure. And, I know there's a lot of folks on social media that think Logan Stanley has very little value. You can believe what you want. That's just not true. And, again, the guy on Twitter with 3 followers in the egg avatar, he doesn't have more contacts in the NHL world than, say, Kevin Cheveldayoff. General managers talk, they hear things, scouts talk, all that. The Jets protected Logan Stanley in the expansion draft because they knew Logan Stanley would get selected if they exposed him. And they also know, based on calls they fielded over the years and interest and whatnot, that a guy like Logan Stanley, is valuable, certainly to some teams out there. So, I think they would know now and maybe have a clearer picture now that they've seen guys like Samberg and Ville Heinola, obviously Johnny Kovacevic, Declan Chisholm, he was sent down the other day, but another guy, Leon Gavanke, and they've added some other depth here. Kyle Capabianca, a guy we don't talk about much, but he's got some games under his belt, NHL experience. He's still in camp. Ashton Sautner, he just got sent down. He cleared waivers yesterday. But they have some real depth on the blue line, and it may, as you say, Huss, leave them in a position where they would now start to call around to see what they might be able to get for a guy like Logan Stanley, especially if they feel that Stanley's blocking the path of somebody else, and that they don't want to have to make a decision just to keep Stanley on the roster at someone else's expense. How could we maybe turn this negative into a positive, if you will?
Well, I mean, we kind of had done a good job of addressing the Stanley situation. As far as the two players that can go back and are waivers exempt, it's Ville Heinola and it's Dylan Samberg on the blue line. And, I don't think Dylan Samberg's really stood out either way, but maybe that's what you want in a young defenseman that's going in just to sort of be steady and take care of what he needs to do. Right. Ville's very different than that. I mean, he stood out in multiple ways. And Saturday was a perfect example of it. I mean, the first goal behind Connor Hellebuck was a giveaway by Ville Heinola that was quickly in the back of the net. But to his credit, Rick Bowness stuck by him. He looked really good moving the puck on the power play. I think that's a big, big benefit for him as well. And seemed to have some real confidence and ended up getting on the score sheet later on as well. When you're thinking about the two, I mean, if it did come down to a decision for October 14th to be on the roster or in the lineup between Ville Heinola and Dylan Samberg, assuming that they had to send one of the other guys back for numbers, where are you at on that right now, Mike, heading into these final two games?
I flip-flopped on that, and probably a few days ago I would have said I would have Samberg ahead of Ville Heinola, but I think I would now actually go the other route, Huss, and a big part of that is because of what we saw from Ville and how he was used the other night on Saturday. I think that was a bit of a tell. Yes, he had the tough giveaway, which it was interesting to hear Rick Bowness after the game. In a way, he kind of absolved Ville of a lot of the blame on that play. He actually put the emphasis on the forwards for kind of abandoning the zone and not giving Ville Heinola much option there in terms of an outlet. That aside, he was quarterbacking PP1 the other day. And it's worth noting, Huss, no Josh Morrissey wasn't in the lineup the other night, but Neil Pionk was. And I thought it was really interesting to see Ville out there. And not only out there, he looked absolutely poised and polished. And Brad Lauer, he spoke today following practice this morning down at Iceplex. Rick Bowness and his voice box got the day off. But Brad Lauer is running the power play this season for the Jets. He raved about what he saw from Ville Heinola on the power play on Saturday night. And he talked about how it's a real point of emphasis for the Jets this year to get better in that department. If the Jets want to use Neil Pionk in a penalty killing role this year, they obviously want to manage minutes. And one way to potentially do that would be to pump a guy like Pionk maybe off the power play, or at least reduce how much he's being used. How could they accomplish that? Well, if Ville Heinola is in your lineup and he's a guy that you feel that's where he's most comfortable, is out there kind of quarterbacking the power play, that's probably his ticket in the lineup. So I would agree on Samberg. He's had a fairly quiet camp. I think for a player like him, though, he's never going to blow the doors off, with end-to-end rushes or anything like that. You actually probably want him to almost not be noticeable. If he's noticeable, it's probably for the wrong reasons, like he's bad positioning or bad reads or a terrible giveaway. And so he's been quiet, which I think for him is okay. I just wonder, though, if Ville Heinola and what Rick Bowness and company have seen from him, and again, we know where Rick Bowness just came from, right? Dallas. Some really dynamic young defensemen, Mira Heiskanen, Esa Lindell, John Klingberg. Just wonder how much of some of those guys Rick Bowness sees in a Ville Heinola and is kind of salivating at what they might be able to do, especially with this push towards a more aggressive defense involved in the offense. I mean, all of that, you're talking Ville Heinola's language at that point.